This week, we welcome Lindsay Olson as our 49th Friday feature artist. If you're not familiar with Lindsay's textile work, you're in for a real treat, both visually and intellectually. Lindsay is an artist who fell in love with science in the middle of a wastewater treatment plant. Art and science are deeply human endeavours. Lindsay understands that scientific research, communicated to the public, needs imaginative, creative storytellers who connect scientific discoveries to human experience. I'm sure you'll agree, images can touch people in ways words cannot. By using her training as an artist, she works to create engaging art that helps the public approach an intimidating subject, scientific research. Lindsay has partnered with scientists, laboratories, and engineers to learn and immerse herself in the science that informs her studio practice and underpins all modern life. Her work is testament that artists and scientists both thrive on uncertainty and a sense of adventure. This very idea has inspired Lindsay to use her skills as an artist to understand and explain science through her art practice. She does this by using textile techniques borrowed from high fashion to both connect with viewers and create richly textured, stitched, and beaded surfaces that reflect the research she invests in her artwork. It all begins with an intense curiosity about the ways our society is supported by science and technology, and this curiosity has taken her to some exciting places, including an underground neutron facility at Fermilab, a Hadron Collider in Switzerland, a research vessel in the Atlantic Ocean, and the hidden vaults of the Field Museum. Lindsay filters this scientific inspiration through her artistic training to create artwork that is as diverse as science itself. And in our opinion, whether you like science or not, the results are stunning. Lindsay readily speaks about her projects and has given many lectures for the Textile Society of America 2020 Symposium, the University of Illinois Saturday Physics for Everyone, to name just a few. She has taught in the Fashion Studies Department at Columbia College, Chicago, for over 20 years, and her work has been featured extensively in written publications. Lindsay's unique pieces have also been exhibited widely, and her works are currently touring Europe. We are honoured to be talking to Lindsay today as she takes us on a H2O textile art adventure from wastewater treatment plant to the Atlantic and down the Mississippi and into the Gulf of Mexico. So if you're joining us live, we welcome you to leave a comment below and ask questions. And join me in welcoming all the way from Chicago, the wonderful Lindsay Olson.
Hello, Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction.
You're most welcome. I did have to record it a couple of times because I couldn't get the words right. Some of the things, and I had to Google, what am I actually saying?
You did a great job. It was a lovely, lovely introduction.
Yes, the Hadron Collider. I was like, what is that? And my husband said to me, haven't you been watching The Big Bang Theory?
That's right. They do talk a lot about the Large Hadron Collider.
They really do. So I do, full disclosure, I come into this with courageous ignorance, as we call it, that science is a big topic and one that I don't know a huge amount about, but I'm also very interested and curious. So thank you for being patient with me.
Well, thank you for having the courage to ask me, because a lot of artists are really pretty science phobic. And as a matter of fact, I was thinking about it this morning, how after our talk yesterday during our tech rehearsal, that maybe what we should do is start off with my conclusions. And first start by saying that I hope that my projects and this discussion today will meet all of you viewers where you are. I create the artwork to be engaging. We can talk only about the art. That's totally fine with me. We can talk about just the science, or we can talk about them both together. But I've had many experiences actually of delivering information about science and art to groups. And one of the most engaging ones was with a group of 10-year-olds. They're fearless with their questions. And so when I talk to them about going to sea, they want to know things like, okay, how do you have to share a bedroom? Do you have to cook your own food? And where do you go to the bathroom? So I just want to encourage you all to pop your questions in chat. We'll get to as many of them as we can. And I also wanted, this is part of the conclusion part I'm sharing with you. I want to invite you to think about learning like a kindergartner, because that's how I structure my own studio practice. If you think about a kindergarten classroom, it's filled with tactile activities, song, dance, and this wonderful braiding together of play and learning. And then as children go through school, they go through first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade, they get to like junior high and there's hardly any of that fun element of learning. You get to college and all the academic disciplines are pretty much cemented into their own little boxes. So if you think about using your studio practice to kind of connect with learning like a kindergartner, you can go back and do some, reclaim your learning. What I'm doing is reclaiming the science that I missed growing up because it so intimidated me and it was so hard. And then the other thing I want to just share with you is to think about how art belongs everywhere. And one terrific example is that there's a podcast in the United States called Ear Hustle. And the Ear Hustle producers take you to inside the San Quentin prison in California. They collect stories from incarcerated people and they bring those stories out into the world. And it's the most amazing experience to listen to someone else's unique point of view from behind bars. It's a wonderful, wonderful podcast. So that is my inspiration when I need to pick myself up. If I feel discouraged, I'm always listening to Ear Hustle and I get inspired. It's like, well, if they can do this, I can do it too. So that's kind of like my conclusion as my introduction.
Amazing. We've just popped a link up to the Ear Hustle podcast if anyone's interested in having a look at it. So that's amazing. And learn like a kindergartner. I think that's great. That's really fantastic. I think we can take ourselves a little bit too seriously sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you're certainly not alone tonight, Lindsay. People are today and tonight for you. So we've got gorgeous Catherine, and Catherine I know is from New Zealand. So that is gorgeous. Hi, Catherine. Janet's here. Janet's from the US. Hello, Anne from Wales. That's gorgeous. Isn't it lovely that we can connect from people all over the world? Yeah. A little more jealous of your Aussie summer. You know what, Rachel? It has been pouring for about a week. So yeah, the climate change is happening. Hi, Bernadette. Lovely to see you from the UK. Hello, Susan. So fantastic. And then Susan says, stumbling live into this video and thrilled to see your work. Yeah, I love this. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Susan, how you going? And Anne as well. This is gorgeous. It's lovely to see some familiar faces and some new faces. Hi, D Stride. So, Lindsay, why do you think people can be discouraged about talking about science and art?
I think in our culture, there's a lot of separation between art and science, mainly because I think it feels awkward to kind of go across those academic boundaries that I was speaking about earlier. And I know that for myself, when I begin a new science project, one of the first and most formidable parts of the project is to work on vocabulary and understand the meaning of individual words. Because, even if you're studying history and you go to a history convention, which I did one time and listened in a couple lectures, and it's like a foreign language when you cross an academic discipline. And so the trick is to find your way in. And for me, it's vocabulary and language. And, maybe artists feel uncomfortable with science because we don't maybe have that as strong a pull to understanding the world with that filter. And maybe scientists themselves feel awkward about art because, for some scientists, mine is the first artwork they've said to me that they felt connected. And that's actually a huge honor for me to be an ambassador for my profession. and to bring art to people who wouldn't ordinarily go to an art gallery or a museum.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. You've broken down the barriers, you know. You've broken down the barriers through visual communication. That's incredible.
Yes. And maybe perhaps asking people to set aside feeling like an expert all the time.
Mm.
You know, you were talking about courageous ignorance. You just have to walk in and say, I don't know anything. And, you know, Fermilab is one of those laboratories that does an excellent job of inviting the public in and giving loads of lectures from experts, trained experts who actually speak in a way that most people can understand and don't feel foolish about asking questions. So, you know, those sorts of outreach efforts are really important.
Yeah, absolutely. At what point did you get to, or what point did you get to when you realized that your training as an artist could help you learn scientific concepts?
Well, I had a really wonderful experience. Earlier in my career, I would paint idealized pictures of the Chicago area waterways. And around this time, my husband and I had bought a canoe, and I'd be painting in the bow as often as I could convince him to be paddling in the back. And one day we were paddling down the Calsag Channel, and we passed this amazingly beautiful engineered waterfall. And maybe, Angie, can pull up that picture of the SEPA station.
Yeah.
And it was in the middle of nowhere. And I thought, wow, somebody invested like maybe millions of dollars to build this engineered. That's the plant. Is there the one with the water flowing that looks like kind of like a fountain? Not that one. That one's not as beautiful. Did I give you a picture of the SEPA station?
I don't think I have that one, Lindsay.
Okay. Well, okay, so I'll try to describe it. So it's this lovely curved series of cascading waterfalls that come down and enter the Chicago Canal. And finding out who built this amazingly beautiful but remote structure led me to the world's largest wastewater treatment plant. Some of those images that Ange was flashing across the screen. Yeah, that one. It's the world's largest wastewater treatment. During the Great Depression of the 30s, people built very big projects like this. And it was kind of intimidating to get in and work. It took actually about 18 months for me to get in there. But what I wanted to do was to all of a sudden realize that there was a way I could use my training as an artist to learn enough of the engineering in the plant to make art that would tell the real story about water in a dense urban area, which is a very complex and highly engineered process. And I thought, wow, that would be a lot more interesting than these idealized paintings that I was working on. So that was my aha moment. And that actually working on that project, you know, I figured out that if I attended seminars and read books and spoke with experts, that I actually was able to learn. And I would bring my drawing board to the, you know, pump house and think about where all these pipes were. There was like the place was packed with pipes, and trying to decode which pipes colors did what function and everything. Yeah, so those are like the effluent pipes, the orange ones, and there's brown ones and blue ones. And I realized that even if I only understood about 10% of what these experts were telling me, I could do a lot with 10%. But it also meant sitting 90% of the time feeling like completely lost and overwhelmed. And like I said, the language of engineering in that plant was like, whoa, this is like, is this English?
Yeah.
But it was an empowering experience. And I'll tell you, one of the best parts of it was I had finished a couple of microbes. Did I send you a few of those micro artworks?
Are they the stalked ones?
Yes. Yes. There they, okay. That's one of the ciliates. So I brought in all the artwork that I had made about the microbiology process in the aeration tanks, and I put it on the walls of a conference room. And I invited the microbiologists of the plant to come in and see what I had done with the information they shared with me. They were so touched. They were so moved by the artwork and the connection between art and science. And it's really pretty amazing when you think about how you take human waste and then the natural process, if you were to just put natural human waste into waterways, which was done in low density areas for millennia, bacteria and microbes in the water are responsible for eating our poop. So it's like this whole circle of life thing. It's so amazing.
Yeah.
And what engineers have done is they've sped up the process and really condensed what happens so that instead of taking days to treat the water, it just takes a few hours going through those aeration tanks. And there's this whole like Shakespearean drama between the microbes, who is ascendant at what level and which ones thrive in high oxygen, which ones thrive in low oxygen. And the miracle of it is, and this totally blew me away. If you think about human history, it's the discovery of waterborne disease, the discovery of the development of wastewater treatment and clean drinking water. Those three things have saved more lives than any other public health initiative in the history of humans. Literally, a third of us would be dead without these technologies. And you flush a toilet, you never think about it. You turn on the tap and we have clean water. It's just so amazing. It means that science is constantly around us and supporting us.
Yes, I love that. When I was reading through your notes, I was blown away by that fact as well, that I was like, yeah, all those things that we take for granted. And back in the late 1800s, that discovery was.
Yeah. Dr. John Snow in London, doing the first epidemiology, going from house to house and interviewing people who came down with cholera to find out exactly where was the microbe. And that was the invention of epidemiology, the discovery of waterborne disease, because up until that time, everybody just thought it was, bad air. Just keep your windows open and you'll be fine.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Yeah. And even just, going back, I think even further about washing your hands, doctors washing their hands and woo, I know. Crazy, isn't it? We have a lot to be thankful for, really.
Yes.
We do, don't we?
Aren't we glad to be living in the 21st century?
Yes, absolutely. I loved these pieces here that you sent through, and this is a sketch of the work from the water treatment plant. Can you tell us a little bit about this? And then now, how am I saying it? The filamentous bacteria?
This is Nasticoida limicola. Yeah. And these bacteria hook up in big chains. Actually, when you think about what happens in that aeration tank, that was kind of that ugly slide we had on before. It's bacteria that do about 95% of the cleaning of wastewater treatment. But that other percentage of protozoa and metazoa are important for finishing the process. But bacteria and I actually showed this at a water treatment conference in Chicago. And I had a guy who was the manager of a plant in a fairly rural area. And he goes, I want a print of this Nasticoida limicola too. This particular bacteria drove us crazy in the plant. And we couldn't figure out how to get it in balance and make the plant work better. So, it's like human versus microbe once again, but in a different arena.
Yes. And then it moved on to finished pieces. Are these your finished pieces?
Yes. So there was my inspiration and there was the finished piece. And actually that fluffy part, the flocking in that light blue in the background, I took a pair of old jeans and pulled out the spandex. Yeah. That was the spandex part of the jean. It was just the right color for that flocking on this piece.
It's gorgeous. I love it. And then this one here is beautiful too.
Yeah, that's filamentous bacteria 0914, another star player. This one actually functions in a low oxygen environment, and it takes up oxygen from sulfur dioxide and it leaves behind these sparkly little pieces. So there's like little handmade gold sequences in there that I made out of acetate, painting them with acrylic paint.
Yeah. That's gorgeous. So just so a few comments coming through. So Janet says she's an engineer by training, so can totally relate to the jargon. Yes. And the acronyms. I don't know if, I was talking to a girlfriend the other day and she's studying nursing and she's talking about all these acronyms. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. What do you mean?
Yeah. Speak English. We don't get it. I know that's the other thing too. I'd come in and somebody would say, oh, the NACWA conference or, the WEFTEC. And I was like, what? Huh?
I always have a giggle because our acronym's FAT, FATT. Fiber arts take 2. So we remember that one.
Right. Okay. Yes.
We had a giggle when we designed that. And it is sad that not everyone has access to clean drinking water. You're right, Debbie.
Yes.
It is something that we very much take for granted. And
actually, there's there are scientists coming up with low cost alternatives to the kind of wasteful water use we have in our particular wastewater treatment systems. And then there's like solar composted toilets, which are totally amazing. If you've ever been in one, they don't even smell. So I think that as water scarcity becomes more of an issue, we may be moving in that direction. So
yeah, we have a composting toilet. We own a little farm, and there's no power or electricity or plumbing, and we have a composting toilet, and it's great. Yeah, it's fantastic. It doesn't smell. You
just have to remember to do the things they tell you to do to keep it going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's perfect. Yep. But certainly something that people new to it would come into and go, "Where's the loo?" And I'm like, "Well, there it is there."
Well, you're so ahead of the curve.
I don't know. B says, I totally connect to language in art making. Richard Sierra verb comes to mind. Drawing is a verb.
Yes. Wonderfully put, Bernadette. Wonderfully put.
Talk to me about, now this is something that I just resonated with me, the soil sentinels. Oh my goodness. They're pretty powerful to look at. And I'll show the large image of them and then we can go into details. But it's these 3 on the left here, these soil sentinels.
Right. So once you treat the water in the wastewater treatment plant, all that water gets discharged back into the waterway. So the clean water goes off, but what's left behind are all the solids. It's all the poop. And so what happens is that stuff is moved into drying fields and allowed to what they call cure for a period of time. I can't remember if it's like 18 months or something. And then once it finishes curing and the bacteria do their job and these piles are kind of steaming in the winter, there's definitely activity happening, microbial activity happening in there. That quote unquote leftover from the wastewater treatment process is in fact a kind of wonderful fertilizer that is used on farm fields and to dress lawns and golf courses. And I wanted these pieces to kind of support the idea that the people in wastewater treatment who are perhaps often ignored, underappreciated, are in fact environmental heroes and helping us reclaim something that we consider waste and helping it get put back into the environment as something useful. And so I created these soil sentinel pieces. They're, I guess, nearly as tall as a human that you can see in the picture that was just up before. And I wanted them to look heroic because I think all these wastewater treatment professionals are heroes. They're environmental heroes and they're unsung heroes, which kind of goes back to my point that art belongs everywhere. And if you as an artist can train your magnificent attention, because that's mainly what we're trained in is focused attention, on some forgotten, undervalued part of our culture or of nature, this is a really rich source of inspiration. I had no idea how beautiful the wastewater treatment process could be.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I was just reading a comment as well, Lindsay, as you were talking, and Susan, who lives close to where we live, said that most of our wastewater treatment plants have open ponds, which are some of the best sites to see birds of all types. Yeah, the Western Treatment Plant in Melbourne is a site of international significance. Wow.
And you can do that in low density areas. That's a really great solution. It's using the same kind of like wetlands, ponds, that kind of thing. But when you get to a city like Chicago with 6 million people, you can't do it. You can't do it. There's not enough space.
Yeah.
You have to speed things up. But yeah, when you can do it, it's wonderful because that's the way nature does it.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a kindergarten question.
Yeah, do.
So when you're out at the wastewater facility, does it smell bad?
Sometimes, if the plant
Yeah.
is not functioning optimally, it can, but when it's working efficiently, it doesn't smell that bad, because if you think about the ratio in your own home between waste and the water flushing it, it's really dilutes everything pretty well.
Mm.
So well functioning, that's why you have microbiologists at the plant, because they're the ones that say, oh, gee, it's halftime on the football game. What do we have to do in terms of timing and oxygenation? What do we need to balance? There's too much of this bacteria, too much of that. So there are ways that they can control it, but sometimes it's unpredictable. Like I know one time the plant manager told me that the pickle factory released too much vinegar through a pipe burst into the system. And when it hit the wastewater treatment plant, the microbes went bananas with the vinegar, and it went crazy, and was like so much bubbling and everything. He said it took a few days to kind of work that issue out.
Wow.
But good question.
Thank you. I'm still blown away, and I don't want to really talk about COVID, but how they can pick up if people have COVID in an area through the wastewater. I still can't believe that as well.
We were talking about John Snow and epidemiology. This is an insanely brilliant take on epidemiology, is to just test wastewater treatment. Now, I also want to talk a little bit about my choice of colors for this project, because there's like this yuck factor. And oftentimes I'd pitch my idea to show this work at an art gallery. And of course they're like, oh God, art about wastewater treatment. But who does really think this is cool is the librarians who run an art gallery inside a library, because they can see that it's got a lot of potential for education. So I used really bright kindergarten colors. I used reds and yellows and blues in the artwork. And that is my way of using my training as an artist to like suck innocent people, unsuspecting people into the artwork and go, oh my God, this is about waste.
I love that. And I'm going to jump ahead, because you've mentioned this. So I want to jump ahead to something we had down as a question sort of later. But you mentioned that you apply a 3-second rule to your art.
Yes.
What does that mean, and how can we all apply it?
Okay, so if you think about print media like Vogue or any other really like high-end home magazine or whatever, you have about 3 seconds to snag a viewer's attention. And this is very true of artwork as well. And you can watch people at a museum or an art gallery looking at art, or even a science fair where I showed work, and they're like kind of going along, and then all of a sudden they go, oh, let's take a closer look at this. So as an artist, I'm using all my skills that I learned in school for design. When you think about unity, harmony, asymmetry versus symmetry, colors, your values, are your values light or dark, how you position things, where you want the eye to travel in the artwork. And oftentimes for those microbes, I kind of had a sensibility where I wanted to have a lot of open space and a lot of focus on the organism itself. And those actually do suck people in.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I love the whole 3-second rule. We usually use it when we drop our toast.
Yes.
No, it's okay. 3-second rule, you'll be fine. But I love
Right.
it in regards to that capturing people's attention. And especially in this digital age, I think when a lot of art is viewed online, especially over the last couple of years. So to be able to sort of break the scroll, so to speak, is,
Yes.
it's fascinating.
Yes. And if you as an artist want to learn how to do that better, study print ads. Ignore them, like don't get sucked in yourself because they're trying to sell you something. But look at how the artists in advertising are using all of the stuff we get trained for in art school to pull the viewer in and hold your eye on an image and an ad campaign. That's why people spend millions of dollars. If you want to be a rich artist, go into advertising.
Oh, yes, I know. I used to work for a company, and they hired a man who was a big marketing person, worked for a lot of big companies and things like that. And a local chemist did a rebrand, and one little logo cost them something like $60,000. And this was probably 10, 15 years ago. And my jaw just dropped. I was like, $60,000 for that? I couldn't believe it. And it was
Yeah.
just a little green typeface. I'm like, but I don't get it. And he goes, oh, and he went into the story about how green's related to hospitals and health. And I'm like, really? I would have thought blue, but my ignorance. But it's fascinating.
Branding is big. And if you really want to earn money as an artist, go into color forecasting, because color forecasting is like 10 years out. What's going to be popular in 10 years? Those people get paid a lot of money.
Yeah. I love the color of the year of Pantone. That's good fun.
It is. It is.
I would like, I would love to talk about your sound in the sea and the art and science of ocean acoustics, and which was beautiful because you contacted me because you saw Debbie Liddon's interview, and she was talking about the sound and how she translates that. And then we're like, wow, that's fantastic that we're talking about science in art. Can we chat? And I was like, yes, I'd love to. Talk to us about that project and how you got to go out in the Atlantic.
Well, it was one of these really super serendipitous things. I was having a conversation with Dr. Derek Olson, who happens to be my son.
Yes.
He is an ocean acoustician who uses sound, he uses sound to study marine environments, particularly the ocean floor and surfaces of the ocean floor. And he knew that I had done a few science projects, obviously, because we talk about it. And I said to him at one point in the conversation, just kind of casually tossed it out and said, I'd love to go to sea for a residency. And Derek looked at me and he said, I have a friend. She's looking for an artist. Somebody canceled and she wants to have an artist aboard this boat for a trip. So I contacted Jen Mixus Olds, who was the principal investigator for something called the Adion Project. And it came to pass that I was invited to go to sea for 3 weeks with a group of ocean acousticians, which was totally amazing. Now, I was invited for the residency, but this was the first time she'd ever done a residency. And really, the only reason I got on the boat was because I would be willing to work with the science team. So this was the first opportunity that I ever had to participate in science. So when I told my family that I was going to sea on a research cruise, and I think I used the wrong word, that's what scientists call it. But if you say the word cruise to people who aren't scientists, they think, oh, cocktails at 5 and hanging out on the chaise lounge in the sun, whatever, swimming off the back of the boat. No, that is not what happens on a science cruise. It costs about $50,000 a day. That's US dollars. I don't know what it would be in Australian dollars, but it's about 50,000 US dollars a day to operate a science vessel. You are not sitting around waiting for cocktails. And plus, there's no alcohol or any mind-altering substances allowed on the boat anyway, which is a good thing.
Yes.
But the decks are crammed with equipment. We work 12-hour shifts. I was on the day shift, which meant I got up at 7. I had breakfast and got on station, and we worked 12-hour days. And then night crew would work from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So it was like science going on all the time.
Wow.
It was a really intense, wonderful experience.
Wow.
So what I learned from them was that when you're trying to learn information about ocean ecology, you can't really use the same tools that terrestrial scientists use. So like a scientist on land would use weather patterns, geology. They might count species, they check species density. But in the ocean, light only penetrates like the first 200 meters. And below that, everything is dark. So there's a lot of reliance on producing and perceiving sound. Light too. There's a whole group of zooplankton and other animals actually that function with light, and that would be another kind of project to talk about later. But sound is certainly a huge part of ocean life because you can't see, so you need sound to navigate, find mates, find food, to have social interactions between, especially marine mammals. So there's 2 different kinds of ocean acoustics. There's active acoustics and passive acoustics. So if you maybe want to put up the active acoustics artwork, we can talk a little bit about that. So active acoustics uses sound to visualize what life forms actually inhabit the water column. So you think about a ping of sound that's transmitted from the boat down into the water column. Those very orderly kind of waves of sound, like you can see in the second and the fourth panel, travel down the water column. And then in the two end and center panels, those sound waves bump into life forms. They mix them up, and the sound wave that goes back to the ship is a unique sonic signature so that it can tell scientists what's going on down in there. Now, do you see that like big wave at the top of the artwork?
Yeah.
This is one example of how active acoustics can illuminate what's happening under the water. There's this massive daily migration, actually twice daily migration that happens. In the open ocean, there are tiny, like 200 meters down, there's a whole layer of organisms called the plankton. And what's in the plankton are tiny little zooplankton. There's like little fish and squids, and they are food for everything. They are the bottom of the food chain. So everything wants to eat them. So they have devised an incredible strategy for survival. Because there's nowhere to hide in the open ocean, these organisms, you can't hide in, there's no kelp forest, there's no coral reef, there's no rocks. So what happens is as the sun goes down in the evening, all these organisms travel up. And maybe this would be a good point to put that echogram up that looks kind of like that wave in the artwork, if you could find that. So at sundown, all these organisms make a massive beeline for the surface. They feed all night on the surface. And at dawn, they come right back down to the gloom, and they're hiding. They're hiding from predators in the gloom of the ocean, and they're coming. That's the one. This totally blew me away. So the echo sounder is finding and I would like gather around the computer at dawn and sunset if I happened to be up at dawn, but particularly at sunset when I was coming off shift, I would come and watch this, and you could see it happened over the course of about 45 minutes to an hour. There's this mad dash to the surface of the ocean. So the other thing was that you have to, like, in addition to the sound information, the night crew would cast nets to catch the organisms. And that's called ground truthing, because sometimes those images collected on the echogram with the equipment might be due to a weather blip or some other random function. But when you're casting nets at the same time you're pinging the echo sounder, you can see what you're pulling up from that depth and going, oh yeah, okay, this is zooplankton. What species are we pulling up? How many are there? What do they look like? So all of that was really valuable information for verifying the science of the active acoustics. Wow. So if you look at that piece again, at the bottom, I think you had a lovely close-up up before of just the bottom portion of that artwork. Yeah. Every other breath we take on planet Earth, the oxygen is supplied by marine plants called phytoplankton. And I didn't realize this. I only thought of oxygen on planet Earth as a function of terrestrial plants. So these species of phytoplankton are incredibly important to human life and all life on planet Earth. And so I surrounded them with little double zeros because O2 is atmospheric oxygen. So I wanted to kind of separate them and honor them in a way that shows their absolute necessity for life on Earth.
Yeah. And I think just hearing you talk about this piece, Lindsay, is just absolutely mind-boggling and blowing. But equally, I fell in love with this piece before I knew anything about it. So that visual communication that you've managed here, and the colors, and I see contrast, and I see line and shape, and I'm drawn in, and then there's more detail, and then I'm going, what is it down there? And then there's beading, and there's this is a detail of some of this beading.
Oh, this is a great shot. This is a great shot. Go ahead, finish your thought.
Yeah, and then I saw that this is some of the details that you've put in this piece. I just thought, wow, what an amazing piece of artwork. And then knowing what's behind it and the science behind it just makes it even more incredible. It's like this cherry on top.
Thanks. Somebody said your work is kind of abstract, but it means something.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if you go, can you go back to the close up of the blue? Yeah. Okay, so if you stitchers out there, I intentionally made sloppy French knots. I love intentionally sloppy French knots. They're
Yes.
a way to get some of this granulated organic texture that suggests the wild, insane diversity of the zooplankton in that um, area of the ocean, that depth of the ocean. And so I used a lot of, and the other thing I had to do at the beginning of the project was decide I wanted analogous hues, because sometimes as an artist, I get overwhelmed with choice of colors or whatever. And by limiting myself to one color and a different value and different textures, like the shiny silk in the background and the crunchy texture in the zooplankton portion, it really helped me focus more on expressing an idea with simple colors, complicated texture, and I don't know, it just made it made it a little smoother to be able to focus on the science by limiting my color choice for that piece.
Well, it certainly resonates with people. It is a really, really beautiful, beautiful piece. So going back
Thank
to the
you.
last piece, just I want to make sure we cover questions. Kindergarten question, I love that. Were you able to look at bacteria under a microscope? And if so, did this translate into your artwork?
Yes, I did. Except when I was on board, I mean, at the wastewater treatment plant, yes, I had time to look in the microscope, but on board, no one would let me use the microscope because they're all busy. It's like, bring your own, darn it. No, they were very nice, but they were like, no, we have to we had night shift had their job and just as important as day shift had their job. So I had to respect the equipment. But if you guys want to see microbes, go to YouTube. There's an awesome video on there somewhere where this very slow moving bacteria is being bumped into by a paramecium. And the paramecium is going like 90 miles an hour. And the amoeba is slowly encircling that very fast and furious paramecium and eating it. So it's like the tortoise and the hare story. There's loads of this sort of drama that wonderfully nerdy microbiologists put up film of what they're seeing under the microscope. So you don't need a microscope. You can just go to YouTube.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, we'll all be Googling after this, that's for sure.
I hope this is an introduction to making science more friendly.
Yeah. I want to keep moving on because I know that we've still got heaps to cover.
Yes.
Passive
acoustics.
Yes. So such amazing commentary. Thank you so much, Helen.
Thank you, Helen.
Passive acoustics. Now, should we play the video, the sound?
Why don't we show the artwork first? Let me give a little introduction and then, yes, let's go to the sound gallery. So
okay, great.
There were the two parts of ocean acoustics. There's the active acoustics where you're pinging sound into the water column. And then there's something called passive acoustics. And we had 7 study sites on the east coast of the United States, ranging from Florida up through Virginia. So we were going to each of those 7 stations and picking up, we were releasing hydrophones that were sunk on the bottom of the ocean. And these hydrophones spent a whole year collecting data by just listening in 360 degrees, sorry. They were listening into all sorts of things. So this equipment was collecting data on marine life, seismic activities, because there are earthquakes on the floor of the ocean, human activity like shipping, and then stuff like wind and waves. If they were sunk in Antarctica or in the North Pole, there would be ice sounds of ice smashing, and ice is really super noisy. So if we go back to this piece, what I included in this piece was some of the actual data. And what did my principal investigator doesn't normally organize her data the way I organized it for the piece. When she saw it, she goes, oh, it's a directogram. It's 360 degrees of what the microphones are collecting, the hydrophones are collecting. So if you look in the lower left, that's humpback whale data, that bright white patchy looking embroidery. There's dolphin song here. And then as you move in, there's shipping noises. There's also data that no one knows what it is, because ocean acoustics is a really young science. So there's loads of stuff people don't know about marine sound. So there's plenty of opportunity for other people to build on the research for this monitoring project, this ADN, Atlantic Deepwater Ecosystem Observatory information. At the very center, before you get to the equation part, that's the seismic event. And then there are some equations in the very middle. And again, my son, Dr. Derek Olson, explained to me that that is a wave equation that's used to not only interpret acoustics data from the ocean, but wave data for loads of things in science. It's the same equation, for example, that physicists use to analyze wave data in particles. So I thought that was really cool. It's kind of like Tolkien's One Ring. It's this equation that has so much power there.
Yeah, one equation to rule them all.
Yes, exactly. One equation. I couldn't have said it better myself, Ange. That's great.
Well, you mentioned, Lord of the Rings. I have a son and a husband who loves that stuff. So
you're a fan. Oh my God.
I love that. And one of the slides you sent through was this, and I assume this is your working. Is this your workings for that piece?
Yes, this was how I was working out. Okay, so there's the silk tupiani in the background. Now, those of you who know silk tupiani, it has a very pronounced grain. So what I did was I cut them out in squares and pieced them together, but I mixed up the grain lines so that when you look at the surface of those two pieces, the active acoustics and the passive acoustics, they kind of shimmer like the surface of the ocean. And then I'm writing all sorts of notes in the margins. I think that's, what is that? Organdy that I've mounted the silk on. I really like layering silk dupiani on that background. I often use organdy as a backing for my embroidery. And I'm trying to figure out in the sketch, what stitch is going to have the most visual impact? What kind of bead size do I need? How much detail can I get? And, originally there's north, south, east, west. I was kind of thinking maybe I should put something related to ocean maps, but then I discarded that idea. And then there's this braiding at the bottom that maybe I should braid some of the equations into the border, and that didn't really work out very well. But it's these little small samples that really help direct where these giant pieces go, because it would be heartbreaking to find out after you've sewn like bazillions of hours on a big piece. Oh no, this isn't going to work. Got to rip it out.
Yeah.
Planning. So these little tests are good.
Yeah. How long would it take you to complete a piece like this?
This is 36 inches by 36 inches. And the other one is a little bit bigger. It's 5 panels, but altogether it's bigger. Yeah. So it took me about 18 months to stitch both of them. And all of them are assembled by hand. There's no machine stitching in any of them.
Wow.
So
what a labor of love.
Yes. And, there's something about working slowly that allows me to shift gears and think about the science part. Oftentimes what I'm doing is I'm learning a little bit of science. I get stuck. Then I move over to the art making and I get stuck. And, I do work on that for a while. And then if I get stuck, I go back to the science. And it's this slow stitching and this shifting back and forth between science and art thinking that helps me move the project forward as a whole. And I think that's the part I missed in school, was not being able to, work on something obsessively for hours and hours. You have like 1 hour to learn, like for an English class or a math class or whatever. And then the second one was being able to engage my fingers, my hands, my eyes, and learning things that way. That was really, that's what's really made sci art so engaging for me.
Yeah. It's kind of a big reason why we send our kids to a Steiner school, is that there's that full body learning experience. So one example of it was that one time I went to pick up the kids, and the kids were upside down on a monkey bars, and they were hanging upside down, and they were learning. It was something to do with maths. And I said, what are the kids up doing? It looks like they're having a lesson or whatever. Oh, they're learning about this and this and to do with maths. And I was like, oh, that's great. I would have loved to have learned maths hanging upside down on monkey bars.
Me too. And that's why it's important to go back to kindergarten. You have to incorporate song making, poetry, theater, puppetry, all these things which so enrich us as adult learners. And if we could have more of that in schools, it would be so cool. And yet in the United States, I don't know how it is in your country, but in the United States, art and music are the first things to get cut in a school budget.
Yeah.
Such a shame.
No, and we can learn so much from both. Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to talk about, for the ocean experience, I just wanted to say a little bit about what science is like at sea, because that's kind of an unusual thing.
Yeah.
We had a great deal of training at the beginning of our voyage. Safety training in case there's a fire, in case you have to evacuate, you have to have those suits. I think I have a picture of, okay, so we had to figure out how to get in and out of what was called affectionately the Gumby suits. Because if you fall overboard in the ocean, it is really dangerous. It's a very hostile environment because it doesn't seem like it would be, but once you're out in the middle of nowhere, you understand how totally insignificant our little boat and our little human lives are in the middle of this. But the other big challenge is that throughout the voyage, we were moving large pieces of equipment on and off the deck of the ship, which meant that there had to be this incredible choreography between the ship's crew and the science crew and even the vessel itself. So this was like this whole marine science ballet, all of us working together to safely maneuver heavy equipment on a surface that's rolling and heaving. And I remember running out for this picture to tell Jen, who's in the blue helmet jets, the principal investigator, and saying, the people on the bridge say the storm is moving away from us. You're okay. So everybody on board, you have to have sort of a generosity of spirit. And I remember part of the training was in the beginning, the deckhands would tell us, okay, one hand for science, one hand for the ship, meaning you can't carry something like this when your surface is going like this. So you have to be careful.
Yes.
So, and also if you see one lone person on the boat hanging out, they're always looking out. Is this a person who's upset? Are they okay? Do they miss their family? So we were all kind of really looking out for each other.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And one day we were, one of the most exciting parts of the whole trip was we pulled into the last study site shortly after dawn. And it was in Virginia. And there's very shallow water there. And the instant we pulled in, we were surrounded by a pod of about 100 dolphins. Oh. And right through the steel hull of the ship, you can hear squeaking and popping and clicking. And we came out and they were like the welcoming committee. It was like, oh, you're the newcomers in this area. Well, here's the welcome mat. So it was actually pretty. They were probably looking for food though, because I think they followed the fishing vessels looking for the offal that the leftovers, the bycatch or whatever. But it was amazing. It was fun. Wonderful sunsets and sunrises. It was great. So we worked really hard, and I slept 9 hours every night.
Yes,
because it was exhausting, but it was fun.
Yeah. I was lost at sea for 3 days and 3 nights one time in my early traveling years, and we were crossing from one side of Egypt across the Red Sea to go to a place called Sharm el-Sheikh and do some walking. And the boat broke down about halfway through the crossing, and we ended up floating for 3 days and 3 nights. There was no radio. It was a very poor boat, just a 50-foot boat vessel. It wasn't anything like you're on. And we were with 23 other travelers and a couple of crew members. And we ended up down onto the coast, almost onto the coast of Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
So when you spoke about that constant rolling and feeling insignificant, I remember the night that we actually got, and the sunsets really resonated with us as well, the sunsets and the dawns. And when you're out there and the sea's calm, it's you feel you do feel closer to God. I'm not religious, but it's it's something from another world. But the night that we got rescued, we managed to find a flare. We let the flare off, and then a cargo ship saw the flare. They came over, and then the Egyptian Navy that was out looking for us came over to the boat and threw a rope to us. But that night was the roughest night. And we were on this tiny boat, and the ship that was rescuing us was, it felt like you could just jump in the water, and we're like, we'll just jump in and we'll swim and we'll be safe. We're like, no, but it was very rough. And when the waves were up, we couldn't see the vessel. know,
Oh my
that's
God.
we're down here, and incredible experience. Not one that I want to do again, but I'd probably have a hard time. You'd probably have a hard time getting me on a research vessel after that.
Understandably, that's a powerful experience, and you know that really makes you understand that the ocean is so big.
It's
You can
huge.
say
And we
it
were
in
on
words, but if you don't experience it, it's just like so different.
Yeah. No, it was fine. You probably would get me. I grew up on boats, speed boats, but I
That
would go
sounds
on
terrifying.
yeah, I would go on a ship again, but it's just, just when you were talking about that, it just brought all those memories back. I was like, wow, yes, I totally get that. And you've got to be so brave to get on that. But what amazing results that you've had. And one of the images that I loved was this one here, where you're obviously talking to what looks like a scientist.
This is the University of New Hampshire's World Ocean Days, or something like Ocean Discovery Days. And this is a guy, he wasn't, pardon me, I'm mute for just a second. He wasn't a scientist. He was just an attendee. There was like several thousand people going through the Marine Department at the University of New Hampshire. And he asked me to explain the artwork. And it's so much fun to engage with the public and share my art either this way on Facebook or in person. I kind of miss doing it in person, as most of us do, but it's lovely to have the opportunity to share this work with all of you, and to have this terrific opportunity.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'm just going to check on some comments before.
Yeah.
A young person on a broken down boat. Yes, sounds like a movie.
Jeez, there is a movie about those. Horror movies, you know, like Jaws or something, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, Georgia, thank you so much. What an immersive experience. Your art
Oh,
speaks.
Georgia, you made it. Hi, this is my friend. This is Georgia, who hired me to be the artist in residence at Fermilab.
Oh, Georgia, that's fantastic. How gorgeous. I was wondering if there was any mention of a butterfly effect, the underwater earthquakes causing something somewhere else on the planet, for example. I'm not familiar with that, but like if there's an earthquake under the water, does it affect butterflies? Is that what it means?
We need an ocean geologist is what we need.
Yes.
Is there a geologist in the house?
Yes. Yeah. Dee says, I am not so strange after all. I love photography, and always yes.
We love your nerdiness. This is like when you're a grown up, you don't care about, I mean, your job is to be nerdy. Your job is to like find something that you can like totally dive into. And that's, you know, you're afraid to be called a nerd as a child, but when you grow up, that's your job. Your job is to like be a nerd in whatever area.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love it. I would love to play that video. And before we do,
this sounds, yes.
Yeah, before we do, because I've just recognized it myself, I want to pop up the passive acoustics piece again and just have a quick look and see if you can recognize any patterns here. So I'm looking at the whale in the bottom left-hand corner here, and I'm totally recognizing the piece that's connected, the little white piece here that's connected to the bottom line. I can hear that in my mind because I've listened to the sound already. So see if anyone can recognize that when we play this. I love that.
Thank you for playing that. I just think it's so wonderful to be able to hear and experience what, what ocean mammals, experience, that sound, that communication. We know nothing about what they're saying, but boy, wouldn't it be fun as a scientist to try to uncover that language?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I loved it. And we'll pop up a link to the site where that footage and the sounds came from.
Great. Thanks,
And
because you can spend hours listening. You can
you can
completely nerd
certainly.
out.
Yes, and I just loved that whale, that that ooh, and then you saw it go down, and I think I recognized that on your piece, but beautiful.
There's an ocean process that happens. It's called the SOFAR channel, and it's where temperature, salinity, and pressure are perfect for transmitting low frequency sound like the humpback whale song. And humpback whales deliberately send their song into this SOFAR channel. And so it can travel thousands of miles, that sound, in that ocean process. So if there's some animal that's sounding in Florida, it can travel all the way north to Nova Scotia. I'm giving northern hemisphere bias here. I should have thought of a southern hemisphere equivalent.
Okay.
Sorry about that for all you Aussies.
Yeah, true.
But literally, it can travel across the ocean. That'll give you a bigger, that's another equivalent.
Wow. Well, Bernadette says the butterfly effect refers to when a butterfly flaps its wings in, say, Australia, it affects a tornado on the other side of the world. But she's not 100% sure if it's more of a spiritual idea or because she's heard it mentioned in science lectures, though. So maybe that's another idea to pop. Yeah,
check it out, Bernadette, and let us know.
Yeah. Good question, Anne. Thanks for a great talk. Lindsay, what is next? That's what I was hoping to get to. What are you working on now?
Perfect question. Okay.
Yeah.
So my current project, which is still in process, I still have a good 9 months worth of work left, is called Land and Sea: Intimate Connections. And I was inspired by a scientist who did research on the connection between the nutrients of land in an island in the Pacific washing into the ocean and how that affected ocean life. So I looked in my own backyard. I live in the Midwest of the United States, and I live in the Des Plaines watershed, but that is part of a much larger watershed called the Mississippi River Basin. And I discovered that, this is, okay, so the Mississippi watershed is a river system that covers literally 40% of the United States, and it all funnels down to that yellow portion in Louisiana. And what's happening in these land areas is very heavily agricultural areas in the Midwest. Are the way that we farm is affecting something that's happening in the Gulf of Mexico. If you could put the next, that's it, perfect. So this is the dead zone that forms at the mouth of the Mississippi River that is washing excess farming chemicals into the ocean. Now, when you think about the size of this, and I'll tell you it's like 8,000 kilometers or something, but if you imagine literally driving across one side of the state, maybe from like the distance of Queensland, I hope my geography is so bad that that's like not 8,000 kilometers. But if you had to go to work, I mean, the dead zone, all the fish have left this zone because it's low oxygen. It means that fishing boats, if you're stationed in Louisiana, you have to like have an enormous commute to get to where your fish are. So this dead zone is affecting the ecology of the ocean, the livelihood of fishermen, so many things. And I wanted to discover what was happening in the Mississippi River watershed area that created this dead zone. And the majority, some of the excess chemicals that are getting washed off farm fields are the cause of it. There's also excess phosphorus being washed down the Mississippi River from urban wastewater treatment. But about 70% of the chemicals that cause a dead zone like this to form are because we farm conventionally. And if you put up the conventional farm piece, we can talk a little bit about, So this is the conventional farm piece. And you can see the rivers that I've embroidered, and it's not a close-up here, but they're raised off the surface and there's water dripping off the piece from the rivers. These are fields, farm fields that I'm representing of conventional farming. And conventional farming uses stuff like heavy tilling of the fields, which breaks up the soil. Lots of what farmers call inputs, which is synthetic nitrogen, synthetic phosphorus, lots of herbicides. And what that does is it literally kills all the life in the soil. And it turns the surface of farms into a very slick surface that cannot capture water. It just runs right off. And about 50% of the chemicals that are used in conventional agriculture wash off the field. So there is a way to farm that's different than this. Oh yeah, here's a close-up shot of the river as I'm embroidering it. And there's monoculture. Is like in the Midwest in the United States, we are farming corn and soybean. And these, you can have like miles and miles of fields with monoculture. Nature abhors a monoculture. It's not the way nature works. Nature works by integrating all sorts of crops, life forms together. And I think I had a work in progress for my regenerative agriculture piece in the pile there. It's the one that's got dark brown. There it is. That's it. That's the one. So this is the work in progress for the regenerative agriculture piece. And what I'm doing here is showing that, there's things like perennial grains that you don't have to uproot and plant. There's no-till farming. There's farming that involves intercropping. So you have one crop in a row here, another crop, and a different crop in between. You have buffer zones between a farm and a waterway. And there's a great big circle on both pieces. And that's to remind everybody that water is cyclical. There's a water cycle that begins, if you think about the ocean, water begins at the top of the highest mountain through snowpack and glacier. And that water trickles down the mountain to streams. The streams turn into larger rivers, and it ends up at sea level in the ocean. And then it's evaporated into the clouds. So there's this whole cycle of water is joined together. And we interrupt that cycle and disrupt it by farming in ways that release a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, that don't capture excess water well, because the regenerative farming practices encourage real soil health. So they encourage roots that hold the soil on the land and don't erode the soil into the water system, that encourage microbes and other, life forms, worms and nematodes and things like that, to exist in the soil so that it becomes spongy and it can hold on to the water. And it's a way of farming that would be so much better for the planet. And even if we did continue conventionally farming, but did things like cover cropping in the winter with like cereal rye, for example, and changed our rotation and did very targeted kinds of application for all these chemicals and inputs, that would go a long way to mitigating some of the problems with conventional agriculture. So for the piece, I'm choosing blues and greens. You can see the colors back here. And I'm using cotton because it's vegetative, and I thought that would be kind of a cool thing. And so the next part of my project is dealing with the consequences of hypoxia in the Gulf of Mexico. So I'm going back to looking at ocean processes again.
Wow. That whole project certainly resonates me. I love soil. We own a little farm. We don't do any fertilizing or anything like that. I'm very much interested in biodynamics, and which kind of goes back to where we started with the wastewater, because one of the treatments is derived from cow manure, and it is buried. So they call it a 500. And the cow manure, and I'm not really qualified to talk to it or about it, but basic people can do their own research. But this was developed back in the 1820 with Rudolf Steiner's famous agriculture lectures, and they put cow manure in a horn, like a horn from a cow, a female cow, and they bury it for 6 months, and it's to do with the moon. And then I think from a science point of view, I think it might have something to do with the calcium in the horn and how it reacts to the cow manure. But anyway, what comes out in 6 months is this gorgeous, rich, really colloidal substance that is then stirred in water in a copper pot, and you create a vortex and it gets energy in it anyway. that gets a bit
composting.
spiritual. That gets a bit spiritual, but I love the science behind it. There has to be science behind it as well. And then you flick it around on your garden, you flick it around in fields, and the difference. And when you look at, say, a field that's been used with biodynamics and one that hasn't, the difference is incredible. It's lush, it's green, it's not frost ridden, and there's all different types of treatments that you can do. 501s, 500s, there's compost treatment, all these different things. But it's all about building those microbes in the soil and keeping the soil alive. People don't realize that soil's alive.
Yes. And I love how you're bringing into your farm the concept of animals and crops together. That's part of regenerative farming as well. Because when you remove animal production and put them in feedlots and pen them, that is a whole other aspect of untreated animal waste going into the watershed. But when you bring crop farming and you bring animal husbandry, or, like sheep or whatever, put all that back together again with the manure. It's the way that's how nature works. There aren't animals over here and crops over here. Everything is all together.
Exactly.
So I love how your farm is regenerative. That's great.
Yes. And that's the plan. One day we hope to live down there and be there full time. It's just a little patch of grass at the moment, but we love it. We've got good plans. But what I loved about your artwork was that you were able to visually communicate on a level that, I'm yet to get to, that and it made sense to me when you were looking. I was like, of course that's what that means. So well done, Lindsay.
Thank you.
For being able to bring that artist's eye and mix science with art. I think that's just an incredible gift that you're giving to the world. And the gift that you've given people today by talking and spending over an hour with us has just been absolutely invaluable. And
thank you so much for having me. It's just been a real pleasure. And your audience in the comments were wonderful. It was just such a pleasure being here.
Yeah, fantastic. If you did mention before, I just got a couple of last questions, if you wouldn't mind.
No, go ahead.
I would love for you to touch on, the 3 successful parts to a project. So if anyone's thinking about, hey, I'm really interested in, say, the butterfly effect, what would be some advice for B to make that a successful project?
Okay, so for me, everybody defines success in their own way. And I would encourage you to absolutely go through the process of figuring out what it is that your art practice means to you in your life. So it's taken me a while to figure this out. But for my projects to be successful, there's 3 parts. There's one, I want to make sure that the science is accurate. So there's a lot of really sloppy science reporting out there. So make sure if you're going to look at something that you dive deeply enough to go to trusted science sources and find your own media that's really going to give you factual information. Back that up with other reading on your own, looking at scientific papers. Maybe you could just read the abstract portion of a science paper. That's often enough to get me going or give me the information that I need. You can attend lectures online now. It's so easy to do. All sorts of, like NOVA, PBS NOVA in the United States is a very good example of engagement, making science, meeting people where they want to, where it's more accessible for them. And so that's a really important scaffolding for my art practice, is making sure I have accurate science. Then the second part is pulling all my bag of tricks for art out on the table and, choosing colors, proper colors. Like I said, for the wastewater treatment plant, I used very bright primary colors. For land and sea, I'm using ocean colors and land colors. So there's greens and blues, and they're all analogous hues, and they're on linen. So all of my materials will harmonize together for that project. For the project with Fermilab, I did something sort of mysterious and glamorous. I used black velvet and black silk organza and that sort of thing. So you want to pull on all your art training for the second part. And then the third part is that for me, it's the bringing the project to the public. It's using my art in a blue collar way. My art has a job to do, and its job is to help everybody understand that both science and art are required for a really rich life, and that science saves lives. It surrounds us. We take it for granted because it works so well. But that it's terrific to bring the project to the public, because then you get all this great feedback, like from you and your listeners. So it's really rich experience to be working in isolation in your studio and then go bring the project out into the world and then have the chance to spread it. So it's
Is that the driving force for you, Lindsay? Is to get the message out?
I love all of it, actually. I love all of it. I feel
Yeah.
sad when the artwork's finished, and then I have to remind myself, oh, this is not the end of the project. You know, like I went to see in 2018, and now I'm getting to talk about it still. So it still lives on.
Yeah, exactly. How can others set up their own art residency? If, for instance, they're, you know, what would be the steps? Obviously, you know, not all science-based people would think, oh, it would be great to have an artist on board. But if someone's interested in a particular part of science and they want to approach someone, what would be some advice there?
Well, I would say you have to have a sturdy ego, because there's a lot of no's in the process. There are a lot of people who are just simply too busy with science, and that's very, very understandable. You have to have grit, determination. But I think one of the most difficult projects to get into was the wastewater treatment plant, because it's in our country, it's part of Homeland Security, which is part of the government. And there was a lot of, this was after 9/11 in our country. So there was a lot of people, like security reasons, why they didn't want wastewater treatment plant to be completely open to the unsupervised public. So I had to go before an elected board of 9 officials to present my idea, which was really scary and really daunting. But then once I got in, the trick is to find maybe retired scientists are a good source, or go to, I just learned this, you can go to Google Scholar, and you can pretty much find any scientific paper, many scientific papers. Many scientists have a Google Scholar page, and you can get their papers. Or if you can't get the papers because they're behind a paywall, maybe you email the scientist and ask them if you can have access to the paper. But there's a lot of popular science books that are written. I don't know. I wish that YouTube were around when I was a kid, because it might have made learning so much easier. But now you can go to YouTube and find some pretty reputable science outlets, especially the ones connected with universities. If you go to a university YouTube site, try to find their science community videos. There you'll get some really good, accurate science reporting and science engagement. Yes. You can also try calling the communications department of local laboratories if you're really interested in, for example, working with microbiology, or maybe pharmacies that are, developing a vaccine and you're interested in creating artwork around that. You just have to figure out, try to make phone calls and be very patient. Yeah. I like to think of it as patient pestering. That's what got me to the wastewater treatment plant. It was really patient, gentle, slow pestering. Like not every day, but like maybe every 6 weeks, I'd check back and say, okay,
hey, still here. Hello.
Yeah. What do you think about this? And, what do you think about that? And could I come in and talk to you about it? But, also it's not necessary to actually get somebody to work with you. You can just do it on your own if you're really careful about finding your sources. And plus, it doesn't have to be science. It can be anything.
Yeah.
There are weaving residencies. You can invent a residency really anywhere. Like a library. What would a residency in a library be like? That might be awfully fun.
Yeah. Our ultimate goal is to build some sort of residency at the little farm that we have, and invite people down. It's very close to Wilson's Promontory, which is a beautiful promontory just off the coast, and it's stunning. And I think that there's a lot of inspiration to be had from there, and the beach and farming, and so. An artist residency, I mean, to just absorb yourself in the art and just be totally in that immersive experience. Like, you don't have to go to the extremes of going out into the Atlantic. Totally. You can do it. Yeah, you can do it.
That's true. But, it's important to choose a topic you really care about, because you have a lot of hurdles and there's going to be a lot of things in the way. So it has to be something you're super passionate about.
Yeah. What are you most proud of when it comes to your artwork, Lindsay?
Oh, gosh. What am I most proud of? I think that as a science avoider for all of my academic career, I am most proud that I was able to learn enough science to be able to call myself a trusted science communicator.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I found a way late in life to not miss the boat on learning science, but also making meaningful art. And making meaningful art is a huge gift to artists. So I would say those are the two things I'm most proud about, is finding great meaning in my artwork and great connection to the natural world.
Beautiful. That is so, so special. Janet has been in energy and sustainability engineer for 25 years, and she's now convinced that art is one of the best ways to communicate these ideas.
Oh, Janet, maybe you're going to look for an artist now.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, fantastic. So before COVID, there was a shipping art residency where you traveled on a cargo ship, etc.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes, I've heard of those.
Yeah. Well, Lindsay, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to finish with a slideshow now, and I encourage people to pop your gratitude up and say thank you very much to Lindsay, and we'll pop your comments up as they come through. We've had plenty of comments coming through, and I haven't been able to get to them all, but I think we did get to all the questions, which was really great. So I just want to say thank you so much for everybody for tuning in. I know it's late in the UK. I can't believe we've got some UK people here with us. So
thank you for sticking around. Thanks so much for showing up.
Yeah, and we've popped all your links up too. So if you want to follow Lindsay's work, she has a newsletter that you can subscribe to. And you can also follow her on Instagram as well, and Facebook page, I think, too. You have a Facebook page?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I should pull that up. Did you have my Facebook page, or should I?
Yeah, we'll link it in.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So fantastic. So, and yeah, thank you once again. I can't wait to see what happens next with you, Lindsay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Angie, I really appreciated everybody coming up, and thank you so much for asking me to do this. It's been a delight working with you.
Yes. Thank you, Lindsay. And stick on the line. I'll say a quick goodbye after the show.
Great. Okay, good. Thanks.